Hi, it's Damien Christoph here. Are you ready to take your life to the most incredible level possible in 2016? Well, we've had 3 sold-out wellness summits these last few years, but honestly, nothing comes close to the Wellness Breakthrough, and we have just 3 spots remaining. Your favourite wellness couch experts, the Wellness Guys, Karen Smith, Kim Morrison, Quirky Cooking's Joe Whitten, Marcus Pearce, and of course Carl Brock are gathering in the Dandenong Ranges for 3 days and 2 nights for one incredible event. If you want possibly the greatest peer group in health and wellness to help you catapult your life to the next level, then we'd love to see you at the Wellness Breakthrough from February 5th to the 7th. But again, there's only 3 spots available. Entry to the Breakthrough is by application only, and to apply, simply email your contact details to marcus@thewellnesscouch.com.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Julie Tenner.
And I'm Bridget Wood. And today we're talking about cultivating your child's emotional intelligence. And this has really been inspired, I think, by both of our recent experiences, particularly for me now that my son is talking a lot, and I can have these conversations with him. And it's so interesting to delve into how kids are feeling and where that's coming from. Well, I know, Jules, for you, you've got quite a couple of older kids. You would have really journeyed this one.
Yeah, I really have. It's been kind of my whole parenting philosophy, really, that started with with attachment parenting and moved into aware parenting is all based around emotional intelligence and comes off the back of my 10 years of emotional intelligence work on myself.
Yeah.
So, yes, but I'm really interested to really actually roll with what you've got sort of entering this and coming into it as a mum that's kind of on that cusp of it awakening. I'm more interested to see what has come up for you, what questions, what insights, and then kind of pull it apart from there.
Yeah, I think for me recently there's been a couple of events where I just reflected, wow, like I could so easily have shut that conversation down or shut down that tantrum or just ignored it, because it probably would have been the easier thing than really being present with it. But there's a couple where I just stayed with it, and the insights were gold, like things like, him not wanting to eat his lunch, which I found out was because the sausages were covered in something not separate, which we can dismiss however we want as adults. But for him, that was really important. And once I could understand what he was wanting and empathise with that, and then talk him around to perhaps trying this new way of having them, he was happy as Larry, and he tried them and it was fine. But in that moment, I thought, wow, like I could so easily have just dismissed that, and because we were in a hurry or whatever. But that day I had time. We don't always have time. We also don't always have patience. But I think when we can, there's just such a opportunity, I think, for helping them, to kind of deal with the skills or deal with what emotions are trying to tell them, and also help us heal our own stuff, heal the times that maybe we weren't heard as kids, because helping them is also helping ourselves.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, so there's been a couple of times like that, and particularly with his grasp of language, as I said, there's an opportunity to really converse and repeat back to him the things that he's saying to me, which instantly that empathising with children, where you can say, I really see that you're feeling frustrated right now, I can see that you're angry, even just labelling the emotion for them is just can take the edge off it.
Yeah, so for me that's key when we're talking about emotional intelligence, is to actually get down to what the emotion is. So despite whatever displayed form it's coming in, whether it's anger, aggression, tears, tantrum, whatever it is to get to what the feeling or the emotion is underneath, and to say that back to them. So, there'll be certain ages where it means absolutely nothing to them.
Yeah.
But the more that they have a feeling and then you're giving a label to it, the more that they starts to become part of their lingo, and they start to be able to draw on that as a resource for later in life when, it then becomes very apparent and clear on how to handle themselves. So whilst we might say that it's easy to be too wordy or too, in depth with really little toddlers or preschoolers, I absolutely see the point in doing it as a building block to where they get to by the time they're at school.
Yeah. I like that you say that too, because sometimes I've questioned myself because I really have never been able to speak very well at my son's level. I still use a lot of adult language with him and still talk to him.
I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, I'm beginning to see that it really isn't.
Yeah.
But you can also easily question whether it's the right thing to do.
Oh, totally. And there's I've read plenty of psychologists and books and everything that say you're speaking too much. You've got to dial it right back to very basic instructions, which I think can be really pertinent when you're in a wild, raging tantrum to actually be in it. But either side of that, I think it's perfectly reasonable to be wordy and keep going until you get something that resonates with them.
And it's a constant process of trial and error. And I think, sometimes we get it right and, you can cut through and you can have a resolution, and sometimes you really don't. And that's okay too, because that's when they have to go inward and, try and build their own resources on their own, which serves them as well. But yeah, so there's just a lot to, I think, tackle in this topic, because it's something that parents are constantly faced with around how to deal with their children's emotions. And I think also how to deal with your own emotions that come up as a result of what's going on for your kids.
Now, I have a feeling we've done a podcast on this way back at the start when we were talking about...
Holding the space.
Was it? Yeah.
I think it was holding the space.
I remember talking about that in terms of what a trigger is and how it's an emotional response to us from our wounding, and our subconscious kind of reaches into that deep, dark filing cabinet of memories and pulls out one that looks exactly the same, and all of a sudden we're kind of lost
Fired
in
up
ours.
and,
So it's really part of those tools, I would say, look back on that podcast and certainly look into aware parenting as something that interests you.
Yeah.
But I think step number one for me in emotional intelligence for our kids is recognising what is their shit and what is our shit.
Yeah.
Because that defining line has, I think probably been the best tool I've ever done, because what I'm often getting angry or triggered or upset by is actually my stuff, not their stuff.
And your stuff perhaps that you're projecting onto them.
Totally.
Yeah.
That I'm lost in my own, so I can't be present to them because I'm just angry, or they're irritating me, or I don't know, whatever it is. So being able to recognise my trigger signs has been my number one key in terms of a parent being able to hold the space. So before you even get to your kids, you've got to hold your space yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so this was part of the reason of Nourishing the Mother and of our retreats is to how do you create more space within yourself so that you can have more space for those around you to develop and flourish.
That's it.
Because you can't develop and flourish those around you or under your wing unless you yourself are well taken care of to have the space to do that. So we can't run on empty. We can only run on overflowing.
Yes.
So for me, it was one, putting back into that cup, which numerous podcasts have talked about.
Yeah.
And if you're hitting rock bottom, if you're that engine that's been running with no oil, if you're like firing off angry stuff all the time, lost your mojo, I suppose, for parenting, then please really consider coming to our retreat, because it's part of the focus is how do we get you back into balance and alignment with your truth and self so that you can flourish those around you. So one, when I noticed my trigger signs. So trigger signs are when you realise you're having almost an irrational emotional response. So maybe we'll talk about what ours are. For me, I recognise it because I get a really big kind of surge or flush of adrenaline or anger that is, what's the word? It's so kind of tempting just to dive into, because there's something about it that feels really overwhelming, and I want to just
you want to unleash it.
I want to unleash it. Yes, that's really good. And my heart rate normally increases, and I might get a little bit shaky, and I start thinking or visualizing in my head things that are probably quite violent that I want to do to my children that would have been from my childhood.
Yeah, wow.
So the way that I was treated. So I want to smack, or I want to hit, or I want to just tell them that they're being da-da-da-da-da-da, which normally would not be a mode that I would function with. So I recognise these kind of out of control feelings as, oh shit, something's just triggered within me. Let's just draw the curtain on whatever's happening here. Now, there have certainly been times when I was learning tools to work with my own inner child stuff when I would walk away from my kids in their angers, tears, whatever, because it was not beneficial for me to stay in that with them because I was too lost in my own stuff.
And I think that's also recognising that and that being okay with that decision too.
Let me tell you, Mum walking away and coming back calm is way more healing than Mum losing her shit.
Yeah. And in those moments, when you do walk away, if you have the presence of mind, do you tend to, like say, I'm feeling really frustrated or angry right now, I need a little bit of time to myself?
Sometimes, and sometimes I'm so on the verge of releasing that beast that I can't even open my mouth for fear of where it might go.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm just, I'll be calm enough, or the trigger's not as big, and I can say, okay. Oh, and sometimes it's role modeling too. Like sometimes, as I've said before, my son will press my buttons to a certain point, and I'll be tolerant, can deal with it, and all of a sudden that's it, I've got nothing left. And I'll say to him, okay, if you're not going to leave the room and choose, as we said before, a list of ways to get back to balance, it's then my role to role model that.
Yeah.
So I'm now getting angry and plugged in, Heath. So I am going to take myself away and get myself back to balance before I come and talk to you again.
Yeah.
So even if he can be doing whatever he's doing, it's then my role to show him how that works.
And that's really useful. And that's why I think, our whole spectrum of emotions should be embraced, and where we can use them as tools for good. Like, because you having those experiences of almost, going off the handle and modelling how to, when you can, deal with that is really useful for kids.
I actually think it is as therapeutic, if not more, than necessarily staying there and being present to their emotional state.
Yeah. Because that's then just repressing your own stuff, which is not helpful for you, and is also suggesting to them that their emotions are more important than your own, and that's not...
Or that they never get to witness that in action or tools in action. So they have a kind of warped sense of what reality is, I think.
And I think some of us would have grown up with that, parents, and I think my parents were, kind of argued behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And we're just that tense.
Emotional behind closed doors.
Yes.
It wasn't okay to talk about death. It's not okay to cry in front of our kids. It's not okay to, all of that stuff.
All of that. And I think that's probably pretty typical, right?
Yeah.
Because I even find myself now, like, if I ask my son to, ask himself, where's the sadness coming from? This sadness often comes with a message. You can ask yourself what it's trying to tell you.
Yes, I love that. So I'm still working on that. Sometimes I'll get that, and sometimes I use it totally for myself.
Yeah.
But I haven't totally clicked into doing it with my kids, but I love that.
I mean, he's probably too young to really comprehend it, but I don't think it's ever too early.
No, that's what I'm saying. You've got to start the building blocks.
Yeah, and so now I'm thinking, okay, well, if I'm asking him to do that, then, the other day when I was just stomping around the house and really pissed off, and I still was trying to figure out why, and that's what happens, right? Like, we know, we all of a sudden we just have this, switch that's triggered, and, we've got our hate on for the whole family, and we're just pissed. That's when I was saying to him, look, I'm just feeling really angry, I'm not quite sure, but I'm asking myself why. I'm trying to understand why I feel like this.
That's clever.
Because we don't always have the answers, and it's okay to tell our kids we don't always have the answers, because then that helps them to see that, okay, well, I need to ask myself what the answers are for me.
Which actually leads me into step 2, because I often think emotional intelligence for me they seem to be co-aligned with social intelligence. The more emotionally intelligent kids that I have witnessed also have a higher degree of social intelligence, and therefore a great ability to handle themselves in social situations.
And great communicators.
Great communicators, great skills in the play yard.
Yeah.
Play yard? Whatever, at school.
Playground?
Playground.
Yeah.
Which is the more that they're able to recognise their own emotional state and have the tools or the ability to recognise what it is that they're feeling, the more they can recognise that in others and have the skills for problem solving and working out problems socially within school itself, which I've seen to have enormous benefits.
So it really works almost to cultivate empathy. If they're able to see emotions coming up for themselves and understand what they mean or are trying to tell them, then they can also see those emotions flaring up for other kids and recognise themselves in them.
And if that's been role modelled at home, so if you're role modelling at home empathy, so I see that you're feeling regardless of how I'm feeling, I see that you're feeling this and that your experience of this situation is So in my house we use a lot of I call them I statements. And to start off with, when I was really trying to ingrain this, I actually had a piece of paper on the wall that had the steps they needed to go through for a resolution of a problem before they sought out help from me. Now, initially, of course, I helped them do these steps, but now I say
and
to them...
how old were your kids when you started to do that?
Probably 4.
Yeah.
5. 4 and 5, something 4 and 6, something like that.
Yeah.
And look, I start doing it with my niece and nephew too. So probably about 4, I start using the I statement, and then I build on with it from then. So when we're talking about, because particularly for boys, I notice that boys have much less of an ability to sit emotionally in an empathetic space.
I was laughing thinking about, that's my husband.
Yeah, totally. But it's incredibly different. Just there's something about, obviously, the wiring of the hormones that are surging through them that creates the ability to sit and be present as opposed to wanting to move and be in action. And so particularly for my son, it sort of has come naturally for my daughter.
Yeah.
But it gives her a voice in a situation. So to stop her from being that, I'm going to say inverted commas, the tittle tattler, the one that comes and tells the teacher first or the mother first or the is that she has a skill set of resilience to deal with a situation before she seeks further help.
Yeah.
And for my son, so he has the skill set to actually be present to emotions because he would rather just keep playing footy or whatever the situation is.
Do whatever it is to kind of get that out of his body quickly.
Yeah. Or just ignore it.
Yeah.
We'll just move on.
Yeah.
We don't press stop on the play.
Yeah.
So this is what I say. So I say to my kids, right, if everybody's playing a game and everybody's happy, cool. If one person in that game, because we're big on inclusion, if one person in that game is not happy, what does that mean? That means the game stops, Mum. Yes, that's right. So the game stops. We check in with that person. How do we check in with that person? Step 1, you make physical contact. So you put your hand on their back, on their arm, on their knee, whatever it is that, you know, if they crouch down or we're crying or whatever. Step 1, physical contact. Step 2, eye contact. So you do your best to get into a position where you can create eye contact with that person. Step 3, regardless of whether it was an accident or not, I do work with them to try and say sorry. So I'm sorry so-and-so for so-and-so.
Yeah.
If it's a disagreement, we use an I statement. So when you, I feel, So it's not, you're making me be angry or you're making me, it's when this is happening, I'm feeling.
And that's an important distinction to make because what you don't want it to be is just outwardly blaming the other person.
No, so I'm very, no one can make you feel anything, honey.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
Yeah.
So when I feel, and I would like you to, So it's giving a resolution. So this person knows, particularly for my son, because my daughter can often get into the point where she's, you know, like a classic female, something's happened, she's already spun off in her head and he is blissfully unaware of what has even taken place.
Yeah.
So I constantly am saying to her, he doesn't know unless you tell him. So you have to tell him.
And
what
skills, I mean,
I feel. And I want you to,
Yeah.
So it's giving the whole spectrum of what's happened.
And I love that because jumping ahead for her in terms of negotiating relationships with boys,
Yes.
you know, just understanding, because, you know, that's classic teenagehood, right?
it
like, you
is.
know, us girls kind of spin things into like this massive story that these boys have none the wiser on.
Yeah.
You know?
And none the wiser. And that was a big revelation for me having a son because I grew up with girls. And I just thought my version of events was the way that reality was. And then having witnessed my son, who legitimately has no clue about what socially or emotionally I can see is already played out. No clue. Not even an inkling. Just no idea. So she actually has to tell him. And then his job becomes empathy. I understand that you feel when I will... So they both have a sentence. So it's not just, I'm sorry, It's that the other person has heard them. So it's, again, the way that we practice, or that you and I have talked about, saying back to that person how they're feeling. So even with young kids, when they're going through a problem or they're having a tantrum, is getting into their space until they feel heard. Because often with toddlers, they just don't feel like you've understood them.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing,
isn't it?
Toddlers. Yeah.
I really understand you're angry. I can see that you're angry. You look really upset and angry with mummy. Actually saying what feels a little bit uncomfortable, that is the deadpan truth in their world, is what they need to hear. Because you really wanted that cookie and mummy said you couldn't have it.
Yeah.
And you're really angry. So breaking it down into their world and their reality, what has happened, so they actually understand. So that's what I'm asking my kids to do. I understand that in your world, this is how you're feeling and what's happened.
Yeah.
And then the negotiations can start, and then they've got room to move on with that.
And, you know, that's when you can see also that might actually be enough for them. So if there's a kind of only a low level, you know, tantrum, even just repeating back what's going on for them can take the edge off. Other times that's not going to cut the mustard, and there's going to have to be a whole lot of, you know, continually offering choices or continually negotiating. But what I'm surprised about is just even how that first step of offering empathy and labeling the emotion can really be so powerful.
So powerful. And that they feel understood by you.
Yeah.
So paraphrasing back to that adult, child, toddler, what their version of reality is. That doesn't have to be your version of reality. That doesn't have to be, in inverted commas, the truth of the situation. It's just you putting on their hat and saying, I actually understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you get them on side, as soon as they feel heard, then you're in a much better place to actually start negotiations on how to move forward. The other thing I would say is this is where I do come into a bit of aware parenting stuff with emotions, is I don't always think you have to sort out a resolution. So with aware parenting, they talk about emotions being really cathartic and really healing, right? We've all felt like this. You have that huge, you feel like you want to cry all day, and then all of a sudden something happens and it's the straw that broke the camel's back and you're awash of tears, and then all of a sudden the tears subside and you kind of go, that feels better.
It's almost like you really needed that good cry.
That you really reset. So the idea kind of is that you've got a bit of an emotional debt collection, I suppose, happening within you.
Yeah.
That emotions don't disappear, that pains and hurts, emotional or physical, don't disappear. They kind of rack up.
Yeah.
And for little people that don't have our ability of going, I really feel like crying, and look for a movie or an outlet or a friend to go and start that process with, they don't have that ability. So they wait for something to happen. They stub their toe. They drop a toy. They can't have a cookie. And it is literally, whilst it seems like a huge over-exaggeration of what the actual problem is, because all we're seeing is the cookie or the dropped toy, it's just the straw that broke the camel's back. It's the friend on the end of the phone. It's the movie that makes you want to cry, only they can't access it. So all of a sudden, this process that starts tears kind of opens up a floodgate. And the body kind of goes, oh, well, now you've started. I've got all this list of things that now just wants to come out so that I don't have to store them in here. So that's what I want you to start thinking about with tears, particularly with tantrums and particularly with tears. When you're witnessing something that seems disproportionate to what has actually taken place, it's probably not the thing that's taken place.
No,
it's the fact that they actually need a moment to heal. And sometimes that can be pretty ferocious. Sometimes that can look pretty wild. Sometimes that can feel uncomfortable for us because it pushes our buttons, because perhaps we spent a childhood of, being told that we were suki lalas and it wasn't okay, or the dummy shoved back in our mouths to stop us up, or that, emotion was weak, or that you were being stupid, or whatever
there's
it was.
no time for that, and, pull your socks up.
Yeah, pull yourself together. Yeah. So all of that stuff is our stuff. So if you're feeling uncomfortable in holding, literally just holding your child while they sob, cry, rage, whatever it is, then that is your trigger, and you probably need to start doing some inner child work on that. So the point is, for me, when we're talking about aware parenting, we're talking about tears. I'm not always interested in one, giving a solution, 2, giving a compromise, or 3, negotiating, because sometimes I recognize they actually just need the stopper, the person to create a boundary that allows them to break open and wash over it, to then reset. And it's kind of like breaking a control pattern, I suppose. So they've built something up that soothes them, that stops the emotion, and all of a sudden I'm saying, no, this is the line in the sand. And I'm in doing that, I guess in one way you could read it as harsh, but I'm looking at it as a very loving act, because I'm giving them the wall in which that wave can wash over, and I will hold that space.
It's a loving challenge for them to help them overcome their own brick walls.
And this is part of the the stickiness of parenthood, of motherhood, of really knowing your child and knowing when there's an incident that, one, they need to use skills, tools, resilience for a negotiation to move through, and 2, when they actually need a really good cry or a really good rage to reset. And let me tell you, afterwards, after a huge cry, after a huge anger outburst, they will kind of go, and all of a sudden that sweet angel child that you've been missing will reappear, because they've emotionally reset and you've held the space for them to do that, which is such a huge ability for them to witness it. You can't hold a space for another unless you yourself have had your space held. What a gift to give our children in knowing, 1, how to move through emotion, but 2, how to be held and hold another. Like, what a gift.
That's an enormous gift. And there's so much more research coming out now about talking about how, emotional intelligence is more important than IQ. Like this.
Yes, and in fact that they're intertwined. You can't have, the higher your intelligence, socially, emotionally, and all of the rest, the higher your emotional intelligence goes along with that. I don't know if I said that right, but you know what I mean. The higher every IQ is, the higher your emotional intelligence
Although
is.
Sometimes, as we know, with people on the spectrum, sometimes they can have an incredibly high IQ but not have very, very many social skills, which can be, as we know, a detriment to getting ahead in life, or communicating with people, having connection, all of those beautiful things that having and feeling and identifying with emotion can give us.
So what else have we got on our list, Bridget? Because Bridget and I wrote a list before we started this to make sure we ticked off the things that we wanted to go through.
Yeah, we really it's a big topic, and I think, every day, especially for me, like with the
Oh my
toddler,
God, for every mother, ever.
your buttons get pushed every day, and it's like, oh, okay, that really, got under my skin. You mentioned before about not going into solution mode too much, or not focusing so much on solution.
Yes.
That's really key, and I think sometimes, particularly men, always want to solve something.
Yes, and this is what I'm talking about with my son. I have to actually break empathy down, make physical contact, make eye contact, and then if they're hurt or they've been hurt, we say sorry. So step 1, contact. Step 2, eye contact. Step 3, say sorry. Step 4, is there anything I can do for you? Then allows the reset as well. So you do have to really break it down, I think, particularly for boys.
But I think even just in general parenting, sometimes, unconscious parenting can be, quick, here's some emotion, let's shove it down with a solution. And the solution so often is food, right? So,
So here comes our sweet sugar emotional eating.
Addiction.
Yes.
Yeah, because, I saw it yesterday. A parent frustrated, no time for his kids, tantrums in the pram. Do you want that, snack? Then shush, stop being silly.
Yeah.
And we do it as parents on autopilot.
And look, we all do it from time to time.
We do.
As well. But we're talking about the 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah.
So what is the majority is what will imprint on that adult.
That's it. Yeah, the occasional, divergence from, your ideal is normal.
Yes.
It's part of being human.
And that all of your kids aren't going to employ these tools all of the time either. Can I tell? Like, I've worked like a mad hatter at this, and my kids still don't all of the time do this.
Yeah.
But there have been some golden moments when you're hitting your head against that brick wall and you think nothing's getting through, they're never going to get it. And I can remember this one particular time. My kids were really little, actually. I think Jade was probably 3 and Heath was maybe 5, and I was driving in the front seat of the car, and I was really angry about, probably we'd had a shit day, and I had no emotional space left for them. And Jade was having a fit about something in the back seat and crying. And I'm like, just getting home. I'm not even thinking about you right now, And I could hear all of a sudden Heath in the back, who I constantly say, his empathy like way down. And he turns to her and he goes, oh, Jade, I can see that really hurt your feelings and you're feeling really sad right now.
Wow.
And did this whole spiel of empathy that I didn't have the space to do.
Isn't that beautiful?
And he could employ for his sister when I couldn't help
because
it.
he knew you couldn't.
How amazing!
So he did it. And that's the perfection, right? So that's where we need to also not get so headstrong and needing to be one way, because, somebody else will often come in to fill that space that you can't fill.
Yes.
And that's a beautiful example.
And look, and there's been golden moments of those over the years where I just think, his teacher, like only at the end of last year, said to me, oh my goodness, we sat around the classroom because they've had grade 3, a lot of social issues. It's like the year 9 of primary school.
Yeah.
And she goes, we started talking about this, and I said to the class, what do we do when one of our friends is hurt? And Heath puts up his hand. She's like going like this. And he goes, well, we go step 1, step 2, step 3. And he brought up this whole thing that I had like been going gangbusters with him all week because he hadn't been doing it with his sisters. Yeah. And here he is, like this little angel child spurting this information out. And his teacher's going to me, oh my God, it was amazing. And I'm going, right. So he can do it at school,
but he can't
do it at home.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I also think don't disregard, even if you're not seeing at home, how they're employing that on their own as an individual.
And I guess don't judge that they're not getting it, because maybe they are, but they're just doing it in their way.
Yeah.
And when it suits them.
Yeah.
Another thing that I like to do that I'm just starting with now with Hugo is getting him to identify where he feels the emotion in his body.
I love that. I love that, even as a tool as women.
Yeah.
Because what is the feeling and where are you feeling it?
And it's because so often, particularly as adults, we have become so disconnected with our bodies and with our feelings that starting with our children at such a young age and really helping them to know what it feels to have a feeling in your gut, or know what it feels to have your throat tighten up. Those are gold, because our bodies, our subconscious mind, our bodies revealing to us little things about ourselves or the way we think that we don't often want to know or see.
And if the physical manifestation is actually, in essence, an emotional or belief system based thing, then being able to locate where in the body is feeling that tightening, that pushing, that tension allows the gateway for further conversations around, well, what, like you were saying, what is that telling you? What is the message that comes with that? Because we can hone in on the body part, and we can hone in that it's just a feeling. We're not being suffocated. It's just an identifier of something that wants us to notice it, then the more resourced we are for actually shifting those belief systems and moving forwards.
I love it.
I know. So I really love that we're doing this, because I need a reminder to actually do those things more often, because I phase in and out of them a bit.
I think this would be one of the podcasts that you and I both listen to.
I think it would be. But I love that because I do it for myself.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to kind of do it for our kids, to say, what are you feeling? Where are you feeling it? What is its message? And even if they don't have an answer, just going, that's okay.
Yeah.
I see that you're feeling really, and da-da-da-da-da. And off you go.
And
with all the
that
tools
can
talked
start to become, as it was, for Heath, regurgitating that information, that can start to become their own internal dialogue, which is beautiful, and even if they get it, 50% of the time, then it's...
Oh, can you imagine? It's off to a better start than I was at
absolutely.
25.
Yeah, and I think, this is stuff that so much of us are trying to claw back as adults. Imagine imparting that on all of our children. What a rich life that they've experienced and identification with others that gives them.
But, word of warning, go gently.
Yes.
Before you ever enter a wounding of your child's, you need to check in with yourself. Do you have the space right now for holding this wherever it goes?
Yeah.
Because if you don't start it.
Yeah.
Because you never lose an opportunity with emotion. This is what I want to get through to, is it doesn't ever go away. So if you can't deal with it today, when it comes up tomorrow and they stub their toe, you might be able to, and you'll do a much better healing job tomorrow than if you open it or start it today and then you self-sabotage that process. So before you ever enter your child's hurt is, how am I? Where are my resources at?
Yeah.
And if I'm not in full power, full strength, ready to hold whatever this is, then one, it's a key message for how do I put back into myself and get my self back in balance, back on track.
Yeah.
And two, don't sweat it. Don't feel guilty, because you will always have another opportunity. No tears, no tantrums are ever wasted or lost. Whatever healing gets done in that gets done, and whatever doesn't, you have an opportunity to do
It'll
later.
always come up again. Yeah.
So also, hands off and back to checking in with ourselves and what our resources are like. Filling our cups so we can fill those around us.
That's it. So I really touched on the importance here of being able to hold your own space in order to hold your children's, and that's critical, because there's no way that neither you or I could be as present with our kids in some of these situations if we had not figured out the tools for ourselves. And, are still figuring out those tools.
It's a daily process. To put back into your pleasure cup is more challenging on many levels than it is to just keep going on burnout.
And it's twofold. It's putting back into your pleasure cup, but also, knowing how to ask the leading questions of yourself to understand what your triggers are, because you can't deal with your child's triggers if you're not at the same time dealing with your own.
Yes.
So I really invite you to consider coming to our retreat, which is coming up in March, because we're going to be really unpacking a lot of these tools and also giving you some great things to walk away with, and strategies to take into your life that'll help you find your groove in terms of filling that pleasure cup, and also some techniques to be present for yourself.
Shifting where you're at to move into the flourishing life.
Yeah, and I guess probably in some ways, expose to yourself some of the challenges, some of the fears that you've got that are getting in the way of being more present to yourself and more present to your children.
And we only have 3 tickets left. So if you are in Melbourne, it is on March 5th and 6th. So if you are considering it, please dive in.
Yes.
Now, if you want to connect with Bridget, it's on...
Yeah, urbansandcastles.com. And we've got a film coming up in late Feb. I think it's the 17th, and it's most likely to succeed. So it's perfect for school mums or mums interested in education, because we're looking at the education system and really how it's serving our children into the future. And, really, really interesting one. So really looking at challenging dominant paradigms. How do we cultivate more creativity and innovation in our kids and, let them soar? So that's happening. And to connect with Jules,
it's on thepleasurenutritionist.com. So for contact with Nourishing the Mother, if you have any podcast suggestions, if there's any further questions, information, anything else you're after, please get in contact with us by private message.
And
or
we
posting.
love getting messages.
Oh, we really do. It's so exciting, and it makes us go, yes, look at what is being created here in the tribe.
And it reminds us, often we get, requests for like book recommendations or, questions on certain podcasts that might have even been, a few weeks back or a few months back. And that reignites our interest in those themes. Like, even yesterday I'm like, I've got to order that book, that I recommended to this woman. Yes. So, you're always inspiring us. Yeah. So we'd love to invite you to connect.
Absolutely. So that's Facebook.com/Nourishing the Mother.
So until next week, when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
We hope you enjoyed this Wellness Couch podcast brought to you by Audible. Do you find that you just don't have time to read all the awesome books that you hear mentioned on the Wellness Couch? Well, Audible might just have the answer. Audible is offering the Wellness Couch listeners a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. You can get books like Eat Right for Your Blood Type, Why We Get Fat by Gary Taubes, Paleo Diet for Athletes, or even The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. So to download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/The Wellness Couch. Again, that's audibletrial.com/The Wellness Couch for your free audiobook.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.